He's too good a politician. I will. I may be a lousy politician, but it makes no sense that you can't afford health care and criminals get it free.
Remember your first project? Furrow knows that feeling. Like the first time you hammered a nail in.
The following is an ABC News special presentation.
Good evening. I'm Hugh Downs.
And I'm Barbara Walters. And this is a special edition of 2020.
From ABC News, around the world and into your home, the stories that touched your life with Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters. This is 2020's 15th anniversary special. Tonight, we've had moments that shaped our headlines.
Frankly, any man that doesn't cry scares me a little bit.
Are you sorry you didn't drink?
Yes, I think so.
Did you sleep with Gary Hart?
I wouldn't answer it one way or the other. It's been worse than anything I could possibly imagine.
Moments that stirred our emotions.
When I first saw her across the stage, I knew it was her.
Anywhere in the world, this is not acceptable. But it's happening here in Romania today.
Anybody that can go over and get these kids out should go ahead and do it. It's hard, but it's worth it.
Going ahead with a separation is a very risky business.
Moments that thrilled us.
He came straight at me until he swerved to avoid hitting the cage. Then I reached out and grabbed his pectoral fin.
Now then, just squeeze it out. There it is.
You can't mandate against an idiot on the water.
Moments that entertained us.
I have no idea what makes me as lucky as I've been.
Like the beat, beat, beat of the tom-tom when the jungle shadows fall. Like the tick-tock of the stately clock leaning up against the wall. Like the drip, drip, drip of the raindrop when a summer shower is due. A voice within me keeps repeating you.
And they sit at the bar and put bread in my jar and say, man, what are you doing here?
Moments that opened our eyes.
I'm Kitty Dukakis, and I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict.
We were out on a hunt. We're hunting black people.
We are not ripping people off.
I got no support, no alimony, no visitation, no custody. I got that.
There you go.
I think this is fake. You think it's fake?
15 years of moments, from the newsmakers to the heartbreakers. 2020's 15th anniversary special.
So, tonight we are celebrating because 15 years ago, 2020 was born.
And on this special anniversary, we like to think that we're not only getting older,
Speak for yourself.
but we're getting better.
You know, we've told over 2,000 stories over the years, and we could go on this occasion about the awards we've won or investigations that we've done that have changed laws and sometimes minds, but we're not going to do that.
No, instead, what we want to do is bring you the stories that moved us most and the ones that had the most impact. You might say that this is 2020's family album. And as we turn the pages over the next 90 minutes, Hugh and I and our correspondents also want to share with you our own feelings about the people we've met and the events that we've seen.
And I'd like to begin with the segment about your work, Barbara. It is an impressive body of work. The famous and the infamous, the movers and shakers, princes and presidents, time after time, they've sat down and told their story to Barbara first. But this is just a sample. And as always, Barbara makes it look easy and easy to look at.
I've been driving this for quite a while. You probably deduced that it wasn't new.
I don't want to hurt your feelings, but this is the scroungiest Jeep I have. The upholstery is coming out. I mean, I know we have an austerity program, but this is ridiculous. In all, I've had the opportunity to do 10 presidential interviews on 2020, 3 with Ronald Reagan, 3 with George Bush, 3 with Richard Nixon, and 1 with Jimmy Carter. We've had some 20 interviews with foreign leaders over the years, often at a time when they were making history. General Wojciech Jaruzelski on the day he lifted martial law in Poland. Lech Walesa, 6 years later, in his first formal television interview as Poland's new leader. This is Jiang Zemin, top man in China's Communist Party. He talked to me in the first government interview after the Tiananmen Square massacre. To my amazement, quoting Shakespeare, he described that assault as much ado about nothing. We talked with Boris Yeltsin when he was emerging as a major contender for power. And then again, right after he became Russia's president. He was candid about policy and didn't flinch at the personal. But the rumor lingers. Do you drink too much?
Нет. No.
Да, по праздник.
Yes, on holidays. Yes, sometimes when I meet my friends from my college days, but otherwise, no.
The Iron Lady, as they called her, was Britain's Prime Minister for 11 years. Margaret Thatcher was always a particular favorite of mine. People thought that she was very cold. I think we saw the other side of her. In all, I interviewed her 3 times. She took us into the private quarters of the Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street, a rare privilege. And then when she was forced out of office, she chose 2020 for her first interview as a private citizen.
It's a traumatic shock, it really is. You don't realize it. You're so busy doing things, you don't realize it until you're out. My mind still thinks we'll turn right into Downing Street, and then I realize we're not going to.
I remember sitting in a tent in Tripoli with Muammar Gaddafi. We were on a military base surrounded by buildings, but he preferred working in a tent. And I had to stiffen my spine before I asked this question.
Can I ask you something very directly, which may seem rude? In our country, we read that you are unstable. We read that you are mad. You know that those things have been printed.
And he laughed, the kind of, I don't know, almost a madman's laugh, and then answered very succinctly, absolutely not. Do I think he was crazy? I sure don't. But no trip was as memorable, as mysterious, or as newsmaking as one that began in the middle of the night in 1986. Adnan Khashoggi, the reclusive Saudi financier who had up to then talked to no one, picked us up in his private jetliner, and on the way over the Atlantic, he began to unravel for the first time his part of an arms for hostage deal between the U.S. and Iran.
And they released one hostage and things started moving. So, of course, it became a success story.
We landed on the Riviera, where Khashoggi introduced us to his even more mysterious partner in the arms deal, an Iranian named Manuk Ghorbanifar. He turned out to be the central figure in that arms for hostage negotiation.
What kind of arms?
They were the last part, it is only spare parts for radar. And the first 2 shipments, they were for the anti-tank missile TOW.
From a rascal to a royal, His Highness, the Prince of Wales. I found Prince Charles warm, funny, and smart, but he's no know-it-all.
I failed my maths exam 3 times. I finally got it on the 4th attempt. And I can tell you that was no joke. That nearly finished me completely. Would have been embarrassing all round.
Yeah. Then what do? Then they send you off in the Navy for another 10 more years and really teach you. Here he is, the Prince of Wales, saying, I flunked math. What could be more human? I mean, we could all identify with that, at least all of us who'd not done too well in math. The Prince of Wales was indirectly responsible for my meeting Ross Perot before he became a household word. The Prince was presenting Perot with the Winston Churchill Award in 1986, and that's when I first met and interviewed Mr. Perot.
Well, the Longhorns and the Buffalo greet you when you come in. And
we were so impressed with Perot that we decided to do a profile of him. We thought we might hear about him again. And did we ever? And then there are those who make news because of scandal, outrageous behavior, or even murder charges. Guilt or innocence was the central question for socialite Klaus von Bülow, charged with the attempted murder of his multimillionaire wife, Sunny. As she lay in a coma, a jury convicted him. What I try to do is to ask the question that I know everyone at home wants answered. And I have to kind of take a deep breath myself before I ask it. One final question. Simply this. Mr. von Bülow, did you try to kill your wife?
No, I did not.
A jury acquitted von Bülow in a second trial. He is a free man. The question for Jane Fonda, actress and former anti-war protester, came in 1988, long after the Vietnam War was over. There are still people who, I guess, feel you have never apologized. Would you like to just say something to them now?
To men who were in Vietnam, who I hurt, or whose pain I caused to deepen, I feel that I owe them an apology. I was trying to help end the killing, end the war. But there were times when I was thoughtless and careless about it, and I am very sorry that I hurt them.
Jean Harris. Here was a convicted murderess who touched a chord in the country and in me. When I first interviewed Jean Harris, she was a broken woman, sobbing over the man she had killed, a woman who represented the woman wronged. 12 years later, it was a very different woman, a woman who could take responsibility for herself and her life. You don't feel you're the woman wronged?
No, I think I'm the woman who let herself be wronged.
And in September of 1988, an interview that rocked the country and took on a life of its own. An interview with Mike Tyson and his then-wife, Robin Givens.
He gets out of control. Throwing, screaming.
Does he hit you?
He shakes, he pushes, he swings. Sometimes I think he's trying to scare me. I've become afraid. I mean, very, very much afraid.
Robin Givens left Mike Tyson shortly after that interview. The issue of violence by Tyson arose in another interview we did 4 years later. He was convicted of raping this woman, 18-year-old Desiree Washington.
I begged, I cried, I did everything that I could, and nothing worked.
She never capitalized on our interview. She didn't do any other interviews. She never sold her story. And I thought that she was very believable. General, these men are with you all the time?
They're with me 24 hours a day.
My first impression of General Norman Schwarzkopf was one of size. He was huge, a bear of a man. We met in his command bunker several stories under Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh, 8 days after the Gulf War had officially ended. I soon discovered that he had a big heart, too. The old picture of generals. Generals don't cry. Generals don't get tears in their eyes.
Sure they do.
They just didn't admit it?
Oh, I think they admitted it. Grant, after Shiloh, went back and cried. Lincoln cried. I don't think I would like a man who was incapable of enough emotion to get tears in his eyes every now and then. That type of person scares me. That's not a human being.
Norman Schwarzkopf is some human being. People often ask me, what's my favorite interview? What's the most important interview? And you know, it isn't the heads of state, and it isn't the celebrities. Most often, it's people of courage. Sometimes they're well known, sometimes they're not. But their courage is what stayed with me. Nancy Reagan discussing her fears of losing a breast to cancer, an intimate moment with her husband.
I said to my husband, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for you.
Why did you keep saying to your husband, I'm so sorry? Did you feel guilty that you were depriving him?
I guess that's a normal female reaction, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I suppose.
I'm sure that was the last thing in his mind.
The last thing in his mind, as he tried to tell me.
And then there was the courage of a 12-year-old boy, Gregory Kay, who actually went to court to divorce his parents and become part of a family he loves. You have said that what you want is a place to be.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
I just want a place where I feel safe and that I'm happy. And I know people will always be there for me. And I think this is the place.
1 week later, a judge agreed. he allowed Gregory's foster parents to adopt him. When it was revealed that Arthur Ashe had AIDS, he and his wife Jeannie sat down with us and touched our hearts, telling it like it was.
It really is demeaning for someone in my situation to have the 1990s version of leprosy, to have to walk around and on eggshells when we know that I am absolutely no danger to anyone. But it'll stop one day, and I hope to be a part of that abatement.
We've had an opportunity to be a small part of that abatement process, too, including several years ago showing people it was safe, it was okay to embrace a baby with AIDS.
The misunderstanding and fear about AIDS are so widespread that even hospitals have difficulty getting proper medical and volunteer help to provide regular care for these sick children.
In 15 years of doing stories for 2020, this was one time there was no need for conversation. The message was the picture.
Well, children are so compelling. And something is always happening, isn't it, that you can report on?
That's true. I mean, just when you think that there is no one new and nothing else to report on, something does happen. Sometimes it's very tragic. But whatever it is, I hope that we will be there to bring that story.
Well, coming up on the program, the sounds of music and its makers echo through many of Bob Brown's most treasured profiles. But first, there are times when the sound that carries on is laughter, like this spontaneous moment with Billy Crystal in 1985.
To me, when you're on 2020, it's 60-60 at least. If you know what I'm saying to you, darling, you look Jewish. You know what I'm saying? Funny you don't look Jewish. I know you're going to say, you are, darling. You look marvelous. You keep it up. I hope the show keeps going. Crazy go nuts. Barbara, you look marvelous. Bye. Bye-bye, darling.
2020's 15th anniversary special. Brought to you by Pontiac and your Pontiac dealers. We are driving excitement.
I have to admit, I'm a little surprised.
About what?
I just never thought I'd see you in anything but a BMW or a Lexus.
Me neither.
Over the years, we've been keeping you up to date on the world of entertainment. Stars rise and fall, but the greatest names in show business endure. And it's that creative edge that so intrigues our Bob Brown and gives him a unique perspective, which he shares with you now.
Like the beat, beat, beat of the tom-tom when the jungle shadows fall. Like the tick-tock of the stately clock leaning up against the wall. Like the drip, drip, drip of the raindrop when a summer shower is due. A voice within me keeps repeating you.
I like to do stories about the musical process. I like to talk to musicians. I love to interview them because if you think about it, music is the glue that holds together most of the memories that we have in life.
For once in my lifetime, I feel like a giant.
Sammy Davis Jr. was among the most memorable to me because he was a chapter all to himself in the history of American entertainers. We profiled him in October of 1988.
There you on that high-flying cloud.
He was open and thoughtful about the controversies he'd been through, but what I think about most with hindsight was that we were around for some of the last great moments he had as a performer because he died only a year and a half later. A complex man whose talent was always larger than any controversy he ever faced.
Mr. Bojangle.
Took me a long time to be happy with myself. And suddenly the realization comes to you. You're a lucky cat, and you better be able to deal with that. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to like you. But if you greet a person and you say, this is my talent, I think they'll give you an even-up chance to try to entertain them.
Mr. Bojangle.
wouldn't normally think of Sammy Davis and Hank Williams Jr. together, except Hank Jr. was another entertainer who was brought up virtually from infancy to perform.
Hank Williams was king of country soul.
I remember him as one of those people who surprised me the most because of the insights he'd had about what he'd been through, trying to make his own way in a world where everybody expected him and wanted him to be somebody else, to be his father.
It was always, your daddy went through this stuff. You'll have to go through it. We have to go through these things, you know.
And they were talking about booze and pills and long
and
nights.
depression. You know, that's a big sport to a lot of people, I think. And it was just drilled into me a lot, you know.
Don't play your cheating heart. Lord, it tears us all apart. It makes a whiskey man hellbound.
I just put Daddy's record on the jukebox and get a nice fifth of whiskey and a couple of downers and sit there and try to communicate with him.
Oh, Hank's songs always make us feel down.
People want to know your most embarrassing moment. Well, we were shooting a story on Madame Tussauds Wax Museum in London, and I stood still in one of the museum's rooms for just a few seconds too long when a lady started staring at me. No, I'm real.
Nothing makes you feel more like a dummy than having to point out which is which.
He's whack. One of the most striking moments I ever saw involved the transfer of the hit musical Les Miserables from London to Broadway. And the composer, Claude Michel Schoenberg, not the world's greatest singer, told us how he had written a song to add to the show after he had heard the voice of the star, Colm Wilkinson.
Such an incredible voice, so high.
It took my breath away when we heard Wilkinson do the song in rehearsal with co-director John Caird.
If I die, let me die. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him
And by the end of it, the company were completely stunned. They were absolutely silent. It was Trevor who said to everybody, well, that's the prayer. And I told you, he said, I told you that this show was all about God. And one of the actors said, yes, but you didn't tell us you'd engaged him to sing it.
The most impressive figure I ever met was David Lean, the director who made Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, Bridge on the River Kwai. He had a vision that he would not compromise. He made only 5 films in his last 35 years. And every time I think of him, I'm reminded of how few others there are who care as much as he did about exercising the power of their principles.
I'm not mad about violence because, you know, what you do, close up, bash, close up, falling down, piles of blood. You know, one's seen it dozens of times, and I think if you can suggest violence to an audience, their imagination is much better than anything we cook up. And so I often try to start a clash then cut to somebody watching. And I stay on the close-up with his eyes looking, and with the sound of the yelling and the clash of swords over him. And then you cut to the street, which is then almost empty except the bodies. And I think that's probably better than showing it in detail.
The most personal story to me will always be one I did following a group of cowboys on a cattle roundup in northern Nevada. It was a simple story in that nothing happened that you wouldn't have expected to happen on it. But it took me back to my own roots. I grew up in the Southwest. And it reinforced a lot of old lessons about doing your job thoroughly and independently and with a minimum of fanfare.
In a job with low pay and long hours, that freedom, not having to explain yourself, is one of the rewards. They may just want to see how the country changes, because they can still appreciate the subtle differences in the land between the horizons. If we see a landscape, they see a mosaic, and they become part of its motion.
You know, this isn't a dream that I'm playing or anything, and it's a job. And it's a job I found that I like to do. Just particular little moments where you'll break over a ridge with, 100 head of cattle in front of you, and it just makes you smile.
You know, I realized watching that's how our Bob Brown, who is such a nice man, works thoroughly, independently, and with a minimum of fanfare. Yeah. Well, still ahead, John Stossel, pulling no punches, but taking a couple of hard hits from a wrestler. Do you remember that one? But first, a moment of inspiration in 1986. The long road back for James Brady, 5 years after he was shot and partially paralyzed in the attempt on Ronald Reagan's life, recaptured this tender dance of hope.
One of the things that any physician who cares for Jim Brady would learn from this experience is to never quit, to never count a patient out, to keep trying, because with a patient like Jim, it'll turn out, it'll be profitable.
Your favorite song?
For your precious love.
To me, than any love could ever be.
It's a long, gradual process, and you have to keep trying many of these things time after time after time after time after time. You gotta play the hand that's dealt you. I mean, there may be pain in that hand, there may not be pain in the hand, but you play the hand that's been dealt you. And I've played it.
Good morning, sir. Would you care for a cereal?
Not just plain cereal. Let me tell you what really tastes great. First,
the way we hate, the lessons we teach, and those we learn. Women who take it, and those who don't. When 2020's 15th anniversary special continues after this from our ABC station.
Your Wednesday favorites at a special time. First, Tim plays Mr. Mom.
What is happening here?
The Nations Security Council tonight voted to set up an international court to try people accused of war crimes in the former Yugoslavia. The White House said today it will conduct an internal review of how it handled the sacking of its travel office last week. And it has backed down on the firing of the 7-member staff, saying 5 are now being kept on paid leave. Later on Nightline, Secretary of State Warren Christopher.
You know, with this weekend coming up and all this great stuff at Builders Square, anything's possible.
There was a cover-up at the White House, and I was in the middle of it. Halfway there, Mr. President.
Well, all right.
Be done long before your barbecue with the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Just doing my job, sir. You can save time, money, and maybe even your country.
Builders Square, the warehouse and everything for your house this Memorial Day.
There it is.
Here in the Outback, we know what's important in life. Food.
You don't mind, do you?
No, right?
You feel the same way. Get to Outback Steakhouse.
I got a bloomin' good recipe for onions.
Should they graduate if they fail to pass the exit exam? At 10.
We learn a lot of things from you, from the mail you send. That's why every week we say, we're in touch, so you be in touch. So many of you tell us how much you appreciate what we call our coping stories. You want the secret to happy marriage, to raising good kids, and you want to know when you're getting ripped off. All of which brings us to John Stossel.
I'm John Stossel from 2020. I wanted to ask you about this, the way you're conning people out of money.
We're not. You helped rip off these people, too. Would you like to talk about it?
I don't appreciate your comments, and I have nothing to say.
The world is full of economic bullies, people who won't give the public a fair shake. I think the best way to get to the heart of the matter is just to confront the person.
Hi, Diane. I'm John Stossel from ABC News.
We're not interested.
Sometimes people just won't talk to us.
We are not ripping people off.
I always get nervous before asking the question that people don't want to be asked. I feel we have to do it, but I'm never comfortable doing it. I always wonder, what will they do?
He's not available right now.
Well, we'll wait. I think he is here. His car is here, and I think he's here.
Well, we'd prefer that you weren't here.
Will somebody punch me? Will somebody give that revelation they've never given before? And I'm always amazed at the things that people do in response to that question that they often must know is coming. Often they just lie, and they lie beautifully.
How many people do you get credit for?
Is my effectiveness rate?
Right.
Be 93%.
93%. I don't believe you. I think you're a con man.
Well, I'm not.
You say you get these people credit. Can we call them up and see if you're telling the truth? Can we check?
That's against the law.
Sometimes you can catch them in their lie just by giving them a chance to prove their claim.
You had people making $500 a week.
That's right.
Can you introduce me to any of those people making $500?
Not within the next 20 minutes.
I'll wait.
I can show you orders. No, I won't either.
Well, we call
and every once in a while, someone is unusually candid.
Calling these people up makes me think that you are a crook.
Well, the way you're putting this is true, that it does appear to be so.
But that's rare. Politicians are especially good at never admitting anything. They're so practiced at evading questions. For example, West Virginia's powerful Senator Robert Byrd is used to explaining why it's good that he appropriates so much money for his state.
Half for the whole country and half for your state?
Well, let me address that.
Here we're talking about last year's highway bill.
We're stimulating the economy. We're creating jobs.
In West Virginia?
Don't interrupt me, sir.
I guess a polite reporter would just drop the question and move on, but I can't help myself. I feel I have to keep asking in hopes of finding the real person behind the studied answers.
Is there no limit? Are you not at all embarrassed about how much you got compared to the rest of the country?
You know, I would think that the national media could rise above the temptation of being clever. The crepidarian critics who twaddle at. This is what you're doing right here.
Twaddle.
Trivially. Serious.
He said we should be reporting on other things. But in any case, I think here we finally met the real Senator Byrd.
Are you embarrassed when you think you're working for the good of the country? Does that embarrass you?
No.
I'm not embarrassed either.
But doesn't this hurt the country?
I think this same confrontational style that I learned as a consumer reporter is useful in other areas. There are lots of subjects that should be talked about that aren't.
How to raise children, for example. I think reporting on family life and children is often more important than reporting on crime and politics that dominates the news. So we've done lots of stories on things like fighting with your spouse, sibling rivalry, nightmare, getting your child to sleep, disciplining children. People often stop me on the street to ask me about this story. This couple believes in spanking to discipline their kids, and they spank a lot.
I'm tired of telling you. Don't ignore me! It looks as if your children fear you. They're cringing, afraid to come near you.
It might look cruel, but it'd be more cruel not to, and let them grow up to be what I call evil little brats.
Now, in these personal stories, some of you may find my confrontational questions harsh, but I think we learn through argument.
It's almost as if you're abusive, that you're cruel.
There's a fine line between spanking and abusing your children. There's a very fine line. And it's easy when you're angry to cross that line. We don't go that far. We're very careful. Now tell her you're sorry.
There are always some people who have enormously private, embarrassing, intimate problems who still will go on television in front of 20 million people in 2020 because they think it will help others. And it does.
This woman was unusually brave to open her life to our cameras. She has a disease called obsessive-compulsive disorder. She feels she has to spend nearly every second cleaning. She dusts Kleenex boxes, even cleans the insides of envelopes, the insides of books.
Let me interrupt you. I mean, you know this isn't necessary.
I know it. I know it.
It doesn't need to be this clean.
I know it.
So why do you do it?
I don't know why I do it.
She's so ashamed of her behavior, she normally hides it, even from friends. But she told us all about it because she thought it might lead people to a cure.
If I were to just take it and say, we don't need to do this in your house. You don't, Kathleen, you don't need to have it this clean.
Would you believe that I wanted to spend my years like this? Would anyone want to spend their years this way?
It's just, no. But it's so hard to understand when you know it doesn't need to be clean.
But I don't understand any more than you understand.
Yet within a few months, she was better. Simply by trying a new medical treatment, she changed her life. For the first time in years, she stopped cleaning long enough to go out with a boyfriend. I'll never forget Stephen Bachner either. He has Tourette syndrome. It's a brain disorder that forces him to make sudden jerky movements and compels him to say the most inappropriate things.
Help! My underwear's on fire.
His underwear's on fire?
I'm a Polish printer penis.
He says he wanted to go on 2020 in hopes people would just understand.
I'm always doing stories on other people's problems. It was only appropriate that I do a story on my own problem. I've had all kinds of treatments for my stuttering. Some places said, speak more slowly. One guy said, speak faster. A number of people said you should breathe differently. One acupuncturist said he could cure me. A hypnotist said that too. But nothing helped me until I got to this place, the Communications Research Institute in Roanoke, Virginia.
I bet I'm making the listener very uncomfortable.
Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's...
My stuttering wasn't quite as severe as these patients, but here they were getting the same treatment that helped me years ago. It frustrates me a little that I've done so many stories I'm proud of where I feel that we've helped people or just made people think about something in a new way. Yet the story that I'm asked about most is this one. I'd always wanted to do a story on how professional wrestling is faked. A third of the people in the audience think it's real. And this annoyed me, perhaps because I wrestled in high school. We finally found an ex-pro wrestler who would acknowledge the fakery and demonstrate some on me.
Oh, here.
It's all in the acting, he said. So to begin the story, we wanted to hear from a current pro who I thought would just say, it's not fake. But instead, I was confronted by this almost 7-foot-tall, 280-pound lunatic.
I'll ask you the standard question. You know?
Standard question.
I think this is fake.
You think it's fake? What's that? Is that fake? Huh? What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's fake? You come. Huh? What do you mean? Fake.
Painful even to look at. And there was a considerable bullying there, considering the weight difference.
That's true. You know, one of the things that is so special about John is that he does reveal himself and his own foibles in his pieces. I think this went further than he expected.
I think so. Well, coming up, the human side of our most divisive social issues, as only Lynn Sherr can tell it. But first, it was back in 1985 that Barbara finally met
Both Visa and American Express Gold cards can get you to La Roche-Guyon, one of the prettiest towns in France. But should something go wrong here, only Visa Gold can get you out.
You had differentiates a news magazine like 2020 from the news. Both give you the facts. But as we've tried to show you over the years, there's so much more to a story. There's the human element that brings the story to life. The people who are the statistics. The victims whose pain is real and whose stories are often told by Lynn Sherr.
No matter how far I go to dig into a story, in this case Japan, the goal is the same: uncover the truth and expose the injustice. It can be shocking. I was stunned to learn about the inhuman conditions in Japanese prisons.
The walls are damp, there's mold on the walls, infested with insects, rotting floorboards.
In Japan, you are presumed guilty, and police have reportedly used kickings and beatings to get confessions.
What we found out about the Japanese prison situation was just frightening. The stories we heard, the restrictions, the rules, the laws, all of this was done in a perfectly legal manner. And the worst part was the size of the cells. Imagine spending months, even years, in a cell this size. Donald Wilson told us that when he stretches out his arms, the width is about knuckle to knuckle.
This scene will also haunt me forever. The public restroom where an American sailor was brutally beaten to death. At first, the Navy denied it, but his friends and his mother charged he'd been killed because he was gay.
My son's face, we couldn't recognize him. His nose was even with his mouth. His eyes were way back here. His whole skull. It never hit me that anyone could beat anyone like they did him.
I shared her pain, especially when I walked into a sailor's bar in San Diego and heard some of their attitudes towards gays.
I harass them every chance I got.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
What's harassing mean?
Hazing. Make them quit. People get thrown overboard, you never know.
That story was chilling and immediate. The human side of an issue being debated at that very moment in Washington. Wherever you find it, discrimination is ugly.
Come on.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Can I tell you something, Seymour?
And the growing focus on women's issues in this country has led to a new understanding of the right and wrong ways to treat us. Which is why I was so taken with the story at this Florida radio station. Liz Richards, a single mother, was fired after filing sexual harassment charges over an environment encouraging crude drawings on the office bulletin board.
My caricature was supposed to be me in profile. With a penis sticking straight at my face with semen dripping off it. That was me. That's my caricature. I guess the obvious question is, why didn't you just leave? Get another job? Because you have to give references. When other broadcasters call to say, why'd she leave? The good old boy network is going to say, oh, God, you don't want her in our station. What a bitch.
I hope all you bitch lesbians die of AIDS. Bye.
That sick phone message was left for lesbians living in Northampton, Massachusetts, a town where gay women generally coexist peacefully and openly with their neighbors. Here, I was overwhelmed by their candor, letting us take a look at a lifestyle most people don't understand.
What's the difference being with a woman as opposed to being with a man?
There's
for me, a greater level of intimacy can be achieved with a woman.
For me, it was making love with women, not making love. It was very hard for me to kiss men. I just wasn't attracted. I liked softness. There wasn't the softness there.
I thought it was important to just see how they live, not in a prurient way, but in a way that would let them be themselves and explain to society who they really are.
I've explored more traditional relationships, too, although Billy Joel and Christy Brinkley may not be your idea of traditional.
You seem constantly amazed that you are married to a woman who happens to be Christy Brinkley.
Well, I'm not so amazed anymore. I kind of understand it now. She digs me.
Not all famous couples dig each other.
The world's baldest film critic. The world's latest film critic. What's the matter? McDonald's was open?
Critics Siskel and Ebert gave me a real surprise. They rate each other thumbs down.
We are completely incompatible in terms of our personalities.
He's a Pillsbury Doughboy of criticism. I mean, you know, just touch that little button, he'll give you a little laugh, and he loves a little movie.
Probably the biggest news story that we've all covered over the last couple of decades has been the social change that has made such a difference in the way we're all living our lives. The rules have changed.
How else to explain the heartbreaking story of Allison Gertz, a privileged 22-year-old with everything to live for? In a memorable interview, she bravely told me about the one-night stand that led to this shattering news from the doctor.
He said, it's AIDS. I said, what? He said, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Carol and Jerry Gertz never believed AIDS could touch their only child.
I thought that I wouldn't be able to handle it. And many times I would leave the hospital and walk home. And I cried one day from, we lived at 88th Street. I cried from 79th Street to 88th Street in the street. I just couldn't stop crying.
It was Allie's courage and conviction that touched me most. She went on a crusade against careless sex, warning other daughters and sons of her own personal horror.
Every night for the rest of my life, I'll think, why me? That's something that does not go away. It's very unfair. Life is very unfair.
Last year, 3 years after my report, Allie Gertz was gone. But not from our memories.
Well, coming up, more women you can't forget. Abused, enraged, possessed. A Tom Jarrell powerhouse. But first, a moment from 1982 with former correspondent Sylvia Chase and a couple of wild and crazy guys.
I'll tell you, Sylvia, I know a lot of big people in show business. There are a lot of big people. Steve Martin, Steve Martin's a good friend of mine. Yeah. Good friend of mine. You kidding?
Where's that?
Steve, Rodney Dangerfield.
Go away.
He's kidding around. He's a comedian. He's crazy. You don't know what he's doing. Steve, Rodney Dangerfield.
I'm busy. Go away.
This is ridiculous. Steve, I got 20/20 here. The cameras is television.
Television?
Hi, come on in. Nice to see you. Come on in. Come on. Seriously. Come right in. How are you? You know, when I first started working in the business.
Hey, do me a favor, will you? Can you cut this part out?
The performance and reliability of a true Hewlett-Packard LaserJet. The new HP LaserJet 4L easily surpasses other low-priced laser printers for the breakthrough price of just $849.
It's us and them. Prime time. Meat packers that could make you sick. Schools out of control. Welfare cheats tell all. Boys under the hood busted. Sawyer, Donaldson, us and them. Prime time.
Thursday only, 10 to 10 only. It's Circuit City's 12-hour sale. Save on TVs like this Magnavox 25-inch with remote, just $286.97. Save on VCRs like this GE with remote, Thursday only $169.97. And save on speakers like these 100-watt bookshelves from Fisher, an unbeatable $88 a pair. Thursday only, 10 to 10 only at Circuit City.
Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art.
His own father stole his girlfriend. Next, Geraldo.
This is Eyewitness News Update.
I'm Alan Himberger. Coming up tonight at 10 on Eyewitness News Tonight. Should high school seniors who complete their schoolwork but fail the state TOS test be allowed to graduate? It's a big problem being debated tonight in Pearland and Pasadena. We'll get an update. Meantime, at Texas Children's Hospital tonight, allegations that a lab technician slapped a 4-year-old child. We'll talk to the parents. And Wayne Dolcefino continues his undercover report on a chain of local pet clinics tonight. Horror stories from eyewitnesses. Now this.
Hello, I'm Lisa Trapani.
I'm Don Nelson. Wednesday, Judy Nelson talks about her love affair with tennis star Martina Navratilova.
That's Good Morning Houston, Wednesday at 9. You're on 13.
Those stories plus Marvin Zindler's Action 13 on Eyewitness News tonight.
It seems the most difficult stories we bring you are also the ones that have the greatest impact. And most often they're stories that reveal the two sides of our nature, incredible inhumanity on one hand and boundless generosity on the other. And the job of covering both often goes to Tom Jarrell.
He came close to killing me. He stabbed me 13 times. He broke my neck, left me partially paralyzed.
Tracy Thurman was one of the most heroic people I have ever encountered. She wore scars on her neck, scars on her face as a badge of honor.
She was a woman who was the victim of spousal abuse, and she couldn't get the police to come to her assistance unless she was attacked. Here's how it happened. Her husband, Buck, had stalked and threatened to kill Tracy for 8 months. He never feared the police.
Buck even laughed because, the police ain't doing nothing about it. I feel as though because they never did do anything about it, it made him even much more braver to come after me.
Tracy came up with this strategy. She knew Buck was coming over. To force a confrontation, she called the Torrington, Connecticut police. But she was viciously stabbed because they were so slow in arriving. And that resulted almost in her death. But she decided to take the risk. And she took the risk for all women. She miraculously survived, sued the Torrington Police Department, and won a $2 million judgment. The case forced police departments nationwide to reassess their policies toward spousal abuse and protect women when threatened by their husbands. Another memorable case showed that abuse in marriages can work both ways.
And I just fired the gun, and this big noise went off, and then I grabbed the phone and got the hell out of there.
Betty Broderick. What a contradiction we found in her tragic case. What a dilemma. Was she a champion of women's rights for refusing to let her husband dump her after a nasty divorce? Was she psychologically tormented by her ex-husband, a brilliant lawyer?
I got no support, no alimony, no community property, no visitation, and no custody. I got that.
Here's what we found. The San Diego housewife was considered supermom, taking care of the home and the children, while her husband Dan worked his way to the top of the legal profession. Things changed when Dan fell in love, fought Betty through a nasty divorce, and married the younger woman, Linda. Betty lost it, took a pistol, and slipped up on them in their bedroom to confront Dan.
I went over there to say, what the hell do you want from me? Why won't you stop? You've got to stop.
But this time was different. You had a gun.
I brought it to make him listen, just so I had something to make him listen.
She fired 5 shots and fled, leaving Dan and Linda, his bride of 7 months, dead.
What I actually felt was relief. It's over. It's all over. Everything's over. Me and him and her, and everything's over. But it's over.
Well, not quite. A jury didn't buy her woman-scorned defense and convicted Betty Broderick of 2 counts of second-degree murder.
I mean, it was so incomprehensible. Supermom on one hand, a cold-blooded killer on the other.
As a 2020 correspondent, I've had the opportunity to travel the world, to reach some out-of-the-way places and meet some really unforgettable people. A day-long donkey ride up the opium pipeline of Burma took us to the camp of warlord Kun Saw, memorable for his sinister laugh. A journey through the rice fields of Vietnam took us to a warm, tear-drenched family reunion. 2 American-raised Vietnamese children back in their parents' arms after a 17-year separation caused by the chaos of war.
But no story emotionally stayed with me as long, struck me as hard. It was more difficult to get through than the starvation in Ethiopia.
When we arrived in the famine region, we were approached by the walking dead.
This woman has clearly got her entire household belongings with her. She's left. She's in search of food. She's probably lost her family. She's even
no
tears.
idea where she's
I've never
going.
seen the tears come. Yeah.
Americans opened their hearts and went into action to help. School children of New York were typical of those who raised money to buy food for the starving in Africa. It took a while for international aid to reach the outlying areas, but Ethiopia's famine was broken, a wonderful example of the kindness and concern people have for one another. Contrast that compassion with what we found in post-revolution Romania. Confined in cribs within state-run orphanages, thousands of children, victims of cruel policies in which Romanian authorities had allowed children to live in subhuman conditions. I remember vividly what was there as we stepped into one room where kids were locked in wire cages. Filth beyond belief. Small children with flies on their faces, many of them naked, unwashed, sliding around in their own body excrement. No attention whatsoever from any professional staff. Being fed like farm creatures out of bowls, slopping their body waste with their food at the same time.
Absolutely the most inhumane, horrible conditions imaginable, and these with helpless, innocent children.
Our viewers were so moved, their response was unmatched in 2020's history. Since our first report aired, we've received over 10,000 letters and phone calls. Money, medical help, professional volunteers were instantly forthcoming. One family sold their home to help. Couples got on planes in the middle of the night, bound for Romania. Many successfully adopted children and brought them back.
This is your baby sister, Jason.
The emotional experience bound them together.
We were fortunate enough to keep track of some of them, and from having seen them in the terrible conditions in Romania, it was such a joy and delight to see them in their new home.
Some of those pieces on the Romanian children, we couldn't talk.
You know, I mean, even now, no matter how many times I see that piece, it still brings tears to my eyes.
Well, still to come, some of life's greatest challenges in the air and underwater, in matters of health, growing old. But first, the meaning of love captured just this year in a moment with an Irish couple and their conjoined twins.
Our twins are so dear to us that we don't want to take any risks with their lives.
Fishy in there. Oh, duck.
Where's the duck?
That's the duck. What's the duck say?
Oh, look at what they're doing. What are they doing? Once upon a time, there were 3 bears.
At Ford Motor Company, we're already building vehicles that meet California's strict emissions.
Okay, I'm not going to say that we've saved the best for the last. I'd like to say that, but I'm not going to say it. I must admit to being partial to the highlights that you're about to see, because they involve some of the most heart-stopping experiences I've had, and some of the most heartwarming, too.
I'm not going to let you say that we have saved the best for last, because, come to think of it, my piece went on first.
That's why I can't say it.
Okay, then in that case, what I want to say is, after working with this man for more than a quarter of a century it's been for us, Hugh, I can tell you that he is stately and steady and unfailingly kind. But then there is that wild streak, and he has his own unique style of hands-on journalism.
I love adventure stories, and over the years there's been a chance to do quite a few. Some seem hair-raising. I'm not a record setter, and I am a devout coward, and I try as much as I can to stack the cards in my favor. But there are things I like to do. My wife says it's delayed adolescence. She might be right. A story on vacation thrill seekers sent me underwater with great white sharks off the coast of Australia. Only the steel cage separated us from those powerful, hungry jaws. But once the mouth went by, I could reach out and get a hold of one, and that'll get the adrenaline pumping. We got some remarkable footage for a story on the birth of a killer whale. This is the first ever filmed in captivity. The name is sort of a misnomer because the killer whale is not out to kill you. They're, in fact, very friendly animals and seem to want to be helpful to humans. Riding one, I got a sense of the strength and majesty of these creatures. I got another feel for nature's raw power on a National Science Foundation expedition to Antarctica. Seasoned explorers here say that a fall into one of the hidden crevices can mean sudden death. And during an exercise on surviving such a fall, the real thing actually happened. Dr. Frank Williamson of the National Science Foundation walked over a snow bridge which deceptively concealed a 300-foot crevasse, a yawning, almost bottomless crack in the ice.
We're okay.
Producer George Auric had stayed close to Frank and saw him disappear into the hole.
Let me grab the end of the rope. I got it.
Acting instantly with no time for thought, Auric threw himself onto the only thing Frank had managed to keep above the gaping crevasse, his hand. Seeing George go down, I hurled myself flat beside him, reached into the crevasse for Frank's shoulder, and together we held him.
Grab, keep his arms. Don't let the ropes through his arms.
It took members of the training team another 4 minutes with ropes to haul Frank up from the crevasse and away from certain death. It was a different sort of excitement to reach the South Pole itself. It's ground zero for map makers, the spot where all meridians and all time zones meet. Here you can cross every time zone and walk around the world in 24 steps.
Coming on around and crossing those meridians that go up the Pacific, we would come to Japan and China and the rest of Asia, and finally Europe. And when I arrive back at Greenwich Zero Meridian, I am where I started, and I have gone around the world.
And around the world, there have been amazing stories, none more heartwarming than the medical miracle I witnessed in the Philippines. Children here can be doomed to blindness and even death due to a simple lack of vitamin A. Children like Cesar, 4.5. Dr. Eva Santos, an ophthalmologist with Helen Keller International, places toy cars around the room of Cesar's dark hut, the first toys he has ever had. Cesar's baby brother makes a beeline for one, but despite Dr. Santos' urgings, Cesar does not. He cannot. He's afraid to move.
Now you see, apparently this child cannot move because he cannot see in the dark.
Cesar is night blind.
An examination reveals dry eye and foamy bacterial bubbles on the white of the eyes, called Bito's spots. Cesar is a classical case of vitamin A deficiency. The liquid in this yellow teardrop is given to Cesar, a mega dose of vitamin A that costs less than 2 cents. 3 days later, we went back to the hut to repeat the exercise. This time, Cesar didn't miss a beat. Without the vitamin A, we are told, Cesar would have gone totally blind within 6 months to a year.
Hey, Cesar, do you want to come out and join us?
Now, instead of going blind in 6 months, he is protected from blindness for 6 months.
I'm going to come and get you.
His life was saved, and it was that dramatic. That's another one that got to me. So did the remarkable story of Patty Duke. She won an Oscar for playing Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. But despite that success, her own life was nearly ruined by manic depression. Rarely have I been so moved during an interview as when she spoke so honestly about the horror that consumed her.
And you feel completely alone. Even if there are people around you telling you that they love you, showing you that they love you, demonstrating support, it isn't. It's terrible to say, but it's meaningless. Whatever this thing is that takes over you, that says that you are worthless, that really the only answer is to kill yourself.
I know it's a sensitive area, but I think it's important to get your views on your attempts to take your life. When you really took steps to do that, what happened? What did you do?
I did it a lot of times. So the methods varied. I usually took overdoses of pills, and it's very odd to sit here and answer you and look down the hallway and know that that's the bedroom. That's the bed from which I could not get up unless it was to go in and attempt suicide.
Other heartrending stories showed America's elderly are also no strangers to depression.
When I was young, I was full of life and vigor and vim. But things change. Slowly. You find you can't do things anymore that you used to be able to do easily. Now it is difficult to do them, or some things you can't do at all.
Many features that we've done on aging, I hope, have helped to dispel some of the prejudices and the false ideas we have about our older citizens. Have been of great worth to me, because being older, that's one minority that with luck we all join. Some fascinating advice came out of a story on the growing number of centenarians. At 100 or more, they have outlived friends, family, even their children. Scientists say one tip for reaching that age is the ability to withstand great loss. We saw a dramatic and moving example of this when we visited another centenarian, Mrs. Mary Elliott. Only one day before our scheduled interview with Mrs. Elliott, she received the shattering news that her 77-year-old daughter, Josephine, had just died of a heart attack.
I'm so stunned I can't comprehend it.
But she was determined to go ahead with this interview, partly as a tribute to her daughter. She told us one of her fondest memories of Josephine as an infant.
I was carrying her back to her crib, and she laid down on the pillow, put her cheek on her hand, and she said, "Now, dear God, let's go to sleep." And she knew he'd be with her. And that made me think, as the morning progressed yesterday, in my state of shock, that I had been asked to give back to God the precious gift that he had given me. And just as quietly, just as beautifully.
Over the years, I got a chance to indulge my love for aviation in several exciting forms. I got a peek at the antics of veteran movie stunt flyers. I picked up aerial combat maneuvers from seasoned fighter pilots.
Now, full left.
Yeah.
Feel how much rudder there is.
Oh, yeah.
All that rudder, just hold the rudder.
You come right out.
Right out.
Terrific. And most personal for me,
a story on the wonders of soaring. Sunset is the most peaceful time, of course, with the heat waning and the wind dying. Now we're simply gliding as the ship and the sun both descend.
Oh, my friend, I hope that we glide together for a long time to come.
I do, too.
You know, you really are an adventurer, and after all these years of working together, I must say you still surprise me by some of the things you do.
I remember I surprised you once, and this, recently, you know, we don't often play practical jokes on each other, but this one worked well, and it's never been seen on the air, of course, but you're going to see it now. We were about to start the show, as I know you remember. We were very serious.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 30 seconds, please. 25. 20. 15. Excuse me, this is a cup. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening. I'm Hugh Downs.
I wanted...
Yeah, I looked at the BMW and the Lexus.
And?
I drove this. The power, the handling, the control. It was incredible.
Calmly into a Dallas courtroom and started shooting people. Divorce court massacres when husbands think they're losing everything. Plus...
burning, searing.
Made me think I was having a heart attack.
But for millions, it's heartburn. How can you put out the flames? Join us for 2020, Friday.
Well, our time tonight has flown by just as quickly, it seems, as the past 15 years. Times have changed, and so have we somewhat. We're lucky now to have Catherine Pryor as a correspondent, and we look forward to showcasing her best work on our next anniversary special. And what can we say about Dr. Timothy Johnson? He is right on top of every medical breakthrough, and he will continue to bring you the best health information available.
So on we go toward our next 15 years. We're already hard at work on stories for you. In fact, a week from Friday, June the 4th, Barbara has an exclusive interview with financier Michael Milken.
Yes, so you may have heard of him as the king of the junk bonds. Not long ago, he was the richest man on Wall Street, the most powerful. And then a fall from grace. He spent 2 years in prison, and this is the first time you will hear his story. Why he pled guilty, and how what happened to him may have affected all of us. Michael Milken on 2020, June 4th.
Well, that is our special edition, our special anniversary edition of 2020 for this evening on a Tuesday. Don't forget to watch Nightline after your local news. In the meantime, we want to thank you for being with us on this program.
And remember, as we say each week, we're in touch, so you be in touch. We will see you this and every Friday at our regular time. I'm Barbara Walters.
And I'm Hugh Downs.
And for everyone here at 2020, let me echo what Hugh said. Thank you for being with us. Good night.
I'm Ted Koppel. Later on Nightline, he's under fire from Muslims, Europeans, U.S. columnists, and the Congress. The Secretary of State makes his own case on Bosnia tonight.
This is Joan London.
And Charles Gibson. Tomorrow, accentuating the positive. How to bring up your children without tearing them down.
Plus, getting the biggest bang for your vacation buck tomorrow on Good Morning America.
If you wish to receive a transcript, please send $10 to Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203. Special thanks to the producers, correspondents, crews, editors, and staff whose talents have made these 15 years possible.
has been a special presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
This is ABC.
And coming up next here.